Right, so fair value gaps. What are they? It's simply an area where price is imbalanced or an inefficiency. Now, ICT came in. If you don't know him, he's just some trader, and he started calling these fair value gaps, and that's what everyone now uses. And now if I use fair value gaps, people automatically assume I'm an ICT trader. No, I'm not. Fair value gaps is just a name he's given it, and it's become popular. However, the actual things that I used to know before, what they were called, is simply inefficiencies or imbalance. Price moves in waves, right? We spoke about this in the market structure episode. Price moves in waves. It doesn't just move in one direction. If it does that, price is inefficient or imbalanced. Same thing, or it's created a fair value gap. All three are the same thing. Imbalance, inefficiency, fair value gap. All the same thing. Now, where these lie is simply where price impulsively moved and we didn't really come back into it, and we didn't really create that wave type structure. So if price impulsively moves without creating that wave like structure, it's inefficient and it's imbalanced and it's a fair value gap. Same thing. Now the question is, what do they look like? So fair value gaps, we'll just look at what fair value gaps look like, and later on we'll get on to which ones you want to use, which one you don't want to use, which ones are valid, etc. But let's just get your eyes. This is very, very crucial. You need to just see it, because a lot of people just have a hard time spotting fair value gaps. Let's just forget about if price reacts to it or whatever. Just look at it, see what they look like. Typically, it is 3 candles. And between those 3 candles, there will be an area of inefficiency. What does that look like? So we can see in this example right here, we have an area of inefficiency or a fair value gap, whatever. So how we mark out an inefficiency or spot one, it's basically an area between 3 candles typically, where wicks do not meet, where they do not touch. So in this example right here, just looking at these 3 candles here, well, we can also use 1 2 3 or 1 2 3, but let's just have a look. The area where the wicks do not touch between these 3 candles, let's just take these 3 candles for example. We have this wick over here, and then we have this wick over here. In between these 3 candles, we have this gap. We have this gap over here between these 3 candles where these wicks do not touch. So how do we mark that out? We just mark it between them, and we move to the side. That's it. That's it, literally. The area between 3 candles typically where wicks do not touch, that is an area where price is inefficient. So we can also move down and look at these 3 candles right here. How we would mark it out is, look, we have this candle wick over here and this candle wick over here. Well, this doesn't really have a wick, but if it doesn't have a wick, then you just look at the bottom of it. But for the sake of this example, we have 3 candles, and in between them, the second candle, which is the middle one. So we have 3 candles, and the middle candle is basically your fair value gap or inefficiency. Between these wicks where the wicks do not touch, you mark that out like that. And we can see between these candles, this area, the wicks are not touching between these candles. So you mark that out, and that is your fair value gap. Now, what isn't a fair value gap? We have, okay, this is a good one. We have these 3 candles right here. 1 2 3. Where can we mark out a fair value gap? It's like, it doesn't work, because this wick and this wick, you can see they are touching. They're in line. There is no gap between them. Look at the difference between this gap between these candles and these three candles right here. 1, 2, 3. There's nothing. There's no gap here. So price is efficient. Key. Price is efficient. Price is efficiently moved in that area. So there's no point of even looking at it anymore. In terms of marking out a fair value gap, it's efficient price action. There's no fair value gap there. Cool. So we move on. Between these three candles, there is a fair value gap. We can see 1, 2, 3. And in between, in this middle candle, we can see this wick and this wick doesn't touch. So that is another fair value gap right there. So price is inefficient in this area. Are you starting to understand what I mean? We'll look at more examples of what isn't a fair value gap, because I think that will be quite helpful. I think that would be very helpful. Okay. Here we go. So we have 3 candles here. Actually, there is a tiny fair value gap there, actually. So, okay, we won't look at that one. Let's see. Let's see. We have quite a few fair value gaps, don't we? Okay, here we go. No, that is a tiny one, because look, this is what I mean. We have this tiny one right here in between 1, 2, 3. These 3 candles. It looks like these candles are touching, but they're not. If you actually look at it like that, there is a little gap there. So again, I'm not going to use that as an example, but you will see candles where here we go. Right. 1, 2, 3. We have 3 bullish candles, but in between there is no gap between this candle's wick and the first candle's wick. So the first and the third candle, the wicks are not, there's no gap between them. They are touching. They've gone actually past each other. So that is not a fair value gap. Price is efficient over there. So in a bullish example, the first candle's wick high and the third candle's wick low. If they are not touching and there is a gap in the second candle, that is your fair value gap. However, if the wick high in the first candle and the wick low in the third candle, if they are touching, then there is no fair value gap and price is efficient. Let's look at some bearish fair value gaps. So we have this we have this bullish candle right here, bearish. Another thing is, some people say that you should only look at fair value gaps between 3 of the same candles. It's not something I really use that much. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I typically just look at the most extreme areas. You don't need to do that. It's just something I do. But that's why I kind of tend to miss a few trades as well. But we'll get into that. So let's look at these 3 candles right here. So we have 1, 2, 3. And this is an example of a bearish fair value gap. All the other ones were bullish ones. So 1, 2, 3. Between these 3 candles, let's look. This wick, well, it's not really a wick, but for the sake of it, this wick and this wick, they aren't touching. Like, if this candle's wick was up here, let's actually draw that. I'll show you what I mean. So let's say this candle's wick was up here. That's actually in line with this candle, so there is no gap over here. But if I get rid of it, we can see now there is a gap between these. So you mark it out like so. And there we go. That is a bearish fair value gap. Now let's have a look at more. There's plenty of fair value gaps over here. Again, we have this candle right here. 1, 2, 3. Between these 3 candles, we can see this wick and this doesn't touch. So you mark it out like that. That's it. That's your bearish fair value gap. I hope that's clear in terms of what a fair value gap looks like. We'll get on to what it signifies and how to use them and how to use order blocks, which ones are valid, which ones aren't. But this is simply just visualizing what a fair value gap looks like, because a lot of people struggle with that too. They struggle with what an order block looks like and what a fair value gap looks like. I've given you multiple examples now of what they look like, different ways. The bullish ones, the bearish ones, sometimes they can look a bit different, sometimes they can be very tiny, but this is what fair value gaps and order blocks looks like. The previous video was order blocks, but this is what fair value gaps look like. Understand it, just mark them out. If you have any trouble marking them out or whatever, send it to me in my Discord, ping me, tag me, and I'll have a look and I'll just tell you if that is a fair value gap or not. So that's the episode done on fair value gaps. Next, we'll get on to premium and discount price actions. So I'll see you in that episode.